to our July gathering so we can talk about our August books in focus. And these are the books that are on their way to the library as we speak. We will start as usual with the list of the sure to be sellers. First on this list is Black Dog by Stuart Woods. This is the book 62 in his Stone Barrington series. Where the Sky Begins by Bryce Bowen. This is it's a World War II novel and about danger, triumph, and second chances. Overkill by Sandra Brown, riveting thriller in which conflict of conscience for a former football star and an ambitious state prosecutor swiftly intensifies into a fight for their lives. William Kent Kruger's Fox Creek, that's book 19 of his Cork O'Connor mystery series. Girl Forgotten by Karen Slaughter, another thriller featuring newly minted U.S. Marshal Andrea Oliver as she investigates a cold case with links to her father's past. The Hunt by Faye Kellerman. That is number 27 in the Decker Lazarus series. The Ninth Month by James Patterson and Richard DeLallo. This is a twisted psychological thriller about a mother-to-be trying to find proof that she's being stalked, even when no one else believes her. The Ink Black Heart by Robert Galbraith. The latest installment in the Strike series finds Cormoran and Robin ensnared in another wicked case. And in nonfiction, we have Listening Well, Bringing Stories of Hope to Life by Heather Morris. On Critical Race Theory, Why It Matters and Why You Should Care by Victor Ray. This is described as an accessible exploration of the crucial framework for understanding and fighting racial injustice. We also have The Viral Underclass, The Human Toll, When Inequality and Disease Collide. And we have been watching that happen for the last couple of years, I believe. Stephen Thrasher is the author, and this is an exploration of a pressing issue of our times. The Fifth Act, America's End in Afghanistan by Elliot Ackerman, and Pathlit by Lightning, The Life of Jim Thorpe. And just FYI, since he has a special place in our hearts, I think, here in the Marion area, I did find out that LaRue remains on the record as the smallest town ever to have been home to an NFL team. Yeah. Just in case you wondered if anyone busted that record, they have not. And we have Diana, William, and Harry by James Patterson and Chris Mooney. Yeah, he's a busy man. Raising Lazarus, Hope, Justice, and the Future of America's Overdose Crisis. And we've got to try
predecessor's abrupt departure, described as engrossing with this darkly feminist tale is pitched against the haunting backdrop, and it will keep you on your toes as you try not to go over the edge. I'm gonna say the next one, which sadly was checked out at some point this morning, is The Children on the Hill by Jennifer McMahon. It also has a similar theme of monstrous consequences and focus on the care of children. Our protagonist is Dr. Helen Hilreth. She is an accomplished psychologist and grandmother to Violet and Eric. And like all grandmothers, she loves looking after them in her home in Vermont. One day she brings home a shy girl named Iris who will be staying with the family indefinitely. 41 years later, though, Lizzie Shelley, a host of a popular podcast called Monsters Among Us, has traveled to Vermont to investigate the disappearance of a number of individuals as well as a number of monster sightings in the area. Described as haunting and vividly suspenseful with this well-plotted story, it will take your breath away and force you to face your primal fears, according to the description.
My, that's a lovely cover. I should have looked at those before I came up. Okay. So, The Rabbit Hutch is a debut by Tess Gunty, and it is the story of 4 teenagers who have aged out of the foster care system. And they have moved into an apartment together. Blandine is a beautiful and bright protagonist who is plagued by the structures, people, and places that not only failed her but actively caused her harm. All Blandine wants is an escape. The Rabbit Hutch is a gorgeous and provocative tale of loneliness and community, entrapment, and freedom. And as Rita likes, I chose Jenny Pentland's recent memoir. This will be funny later. Jenny is the daughter of Roseanne Barr. Very interesting upbringing. And also the classic Lord of the Flies, about teenagers in the wild and trying to get along and make their way.
I can't imagine they raising Marty's daughter.
Yeah, it's actually worse than I thought it would be.
It was worse than you thought it would be.
Yeah, it's very terrible. I mean, the book was funny in parts, but what happened to the children was really awful. Okay, and the next one is called A Map for the Missing by Belinda Huijuan Tang, and this also is a debut. Which way?
You're blocking the
Towards us.
You were blocking.
I never know where to stand. Thank you for moving me out of the way.
She directs plays in her spare time.
What does she do? Directs plays?
In her spare time.
All right. Well, hey, it's better to know than to not know. I'm good. This takes place in from the 70s to the 90s, and it's set against the post-cultural revolution in China. Our protagonist is Yitian, and he has a desire from a young age to pursue knowledge. He ends up as a professor in America, and his childhood friend, Hanwen, the only other person who shared his quest for knowledge, was left behind in China, resigned to life as a mid-level bureaucrat's wealthy housewife. When Yitian's father comes up missing and his mother is suspiciously evasive, he sets out to find his father, and his search brings Hanwen back into his life. They have to grapple with their present and their past, and also selected for this are No Tears for Mao. It is a true story of a woman who was coming of age during that Cultural Revolution. And The Dark Road is a fiction book, and it concentrates more on the one-child policy. I think that came after the Cultural Revolution, but it's still good descriptions and good insight into the culture that exists, and also the extremes that people must go to sometimes just to have a family.
I'm testing our new sound system. Hey! Hello!
I like that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, here we go. So, Benevolence by Julie Jansen. Am I too loud? Is that good? Okay, okay. So this one, the publisher describes it as a vivid and compelling portrait of the Aboriginal Australians whose way of life is forever altered. So the story takes place in Australia, spans 2 decades from 1816 to 1835. The main character is 10-year-old Murraging, a member of the Aboriginal Durag tribe. When white British settlers begin to arrive and colonize, she's forced to abandon her native culture and language at their British school, but she flees and embarks on a harsh journey of discovery. Julie Jansen is an award-winning Australian author and part of the Durag Aboriginal nation herself. So a couple other literary fiction titles with similar themes, also by Australian authors, would be A Long Way From Home by Peter Carey. In this one, a couple learns about some of Australia's dark history while participating in a 10,000-mile bike race across the country. And The Yield by Tara June Winch. A young Australian woman searches for the dictionary that her grandfather, who was a member of the indigenous Wiradjuri tribe, created before he died to preserve the language of his people. Elizabeth Finch by Julian Barnes. So this is a novel about the platonic love that the narrator, Neil, has for his demanding and stoic professor, Elizabeth Finch. Neil develops his intellectual crush on Professor Finch when he takes her adult education class on culture and civilization, and his admiration for her remains uniquely important to him even after her death. So we have themes of love, friendship, history, and biography. Barnes has been nominated for the Booker Prize a few times and won the prize for his 2011 book, The Sense of an Ending, which is the first read-alike. In that one, you have a middle-aged man who is reflecting on his past life. And then you might also check out England and Other Stories by Graham Swift. This presents a collection of character-driven stories which makes piercing observations on human behavior and presents motifs of love, friendship, secrets, faith, and memory. Graham Swift is another English Booker Prize winning author, and as you can tell, some of the same themes in that one.
Our second protagonist is Lou Freitas. We're gonna go with that. A fledgling journalist in 1960. engrossing, smart female characters, meticulous research, and rich detail, you may find yourself starting to look up flights to Hawaii. It was a consistent through all of the reviews. It was really funny to me. The first read-alike I have is also by Sarah Ackerman. It's called Red Skies Over Hawaii, clearly similar location and set also during World War II. Our protagonist is Lana Hitchcock. She is arriving home to the Big Island, too late, unfortunately, to reconcile with her estranged father. She is left, though, to untangle the clues that he left behind. Meanwhile, the U.S. government starts imprisoning her neighbors and sending them to detention camps. With an interesting cast of characters, this detailed, thought-provoking story explores the consequences of trust and the meaning of family during war. The second read-alike I have is The Lost Summers of Newport by Beatrice Williams, Lauren Willing, and Karen White. It has a similar intertwined story structure, focusing on Spurg Hall, which is a famous Gilded Age manor in Newport, owned by the same family for over a century. Andy Figaro, in 2019, has just landed her dream job as a producer on the reality show Mansion Makeover. She starts running into trouble with the reclusive heiress and owner of the manor, especially anytime they discuss making over the mansion's dilapidated boathouse. With lush details and a large cast of characters, the secret of the mansion are beginning to be unearthed as you jump between different timelines from the Gilded Age up through 2019. Mercury Pictures Presents by Anthony Mara, which is also coming in large print. It's on the eve of America's entry into World War II. Our protagonist is Maria Langana. She's an associate producer at Mercury Pictures, and she finds both her professional and personal life just teetering on the knife's edge. An Italian immigrant who came to LA with her mother, she finds herself passing through a maze of conflicting perspectives in this lyrical homage, and this is the exact quote, to the bit players in life. A large cast of characters and rich detail will immerse you into the world of pre-war Hollywood and the immigrant experience. My first read-alike is The 7 of 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna by Juliet Grains. It has a similar focus on the immigrant experience prior to World War II. A young woman tells the story behind her two elderly sisters' estrangement and tries to unravel their family secrets that stretch back prior to World War II and across the Atlantic to Italy. With also a large cast of characters, this richly told story of family transgressions and healing, beautifully described, and the impact that it has on the next generation. My other read-alike is The Girls in the Pictures by Melanie Benjamin. It also has a similar feel on the focus on friendships and females working in Hollywood, though this one takes place prior around World War I period. So it is an intimate portrait of two close and powerful creative partners in the early Hollywood scene. Our protagonists are Frances Marion, known as America's Sweetheart. She's hoping for her big break in pictures. And our other protagonist is Mary Pickford, who is an established actress and considered the queen of the silver screen. Together, the women develop an impactful relationship. However, things, like all relationships, go back and forth and they lose touch over the years. This vibrant novel is about the power of women in the early days of Hollywood and the power of forgiveness.
Okay. Takes place in the cosmopolitan city of Jaffa between the years of 1947 and 1951, during which Palestine was destroyed by civil war. The story explores the lives of two young Palestinians, a 15-year-old mechanic and a 13-year-old peasant girl that he wants to marry, and whose families become displaced because of the war. It's a cinematic, though devastating account of one of the most dramatic and least known chapters in Palestinian history. The author, Amiri, is a Palestinian architect who has written other books on that subject. This is her first novel. A couple read-alikes. Thank you. Salt Houses. This is another debut novel by a Palestinian American about a family that is uprooted after the Six-Day War of 1967. And then Against the Loveless World is also written by a Palestinian American author who's the daughter of refugees. And this one is about a young Palestinian refugee who is currently in prison and reflecting on the events that brought her there. Afterlives. It's a complex, character-based, multi-generational saga that takes place in the late 1800s East Africa. The story revolves around three characters: Ilias, who was taken away from Africa by German colonial troops when he was a boy; Afia, Ilias's sister, who was still living in Africa in virtual slavery; and Hamza, a scarred war veteran, also sold into service like Ilias was. These three have their fates knotted together when both Ilias and Hamza return to Africa, and Hamza falls in love with Afia. So we have themes of colonialism, displacement, loss, love. Gurna is a Tanzanian-born British author who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2021. One of the read-alikes I brought is also by him, called Gravel Heart. This one's about a young immigrant from Zanzibar who comes of age in 1990s London before returning to his home country. And the other read-alike is another new book. We got it in June, called A Trail of Crab Tracks. In this one you have a sick father who's telling his son about the life he lived in Cameroon, the story of his family, the civil war that happened there, and his country. This author was also born in Cameroon, so similar colonial experience, own voices type of novel there.
My, what did that come from? Big Red by Jerome Sharon. It's just 256 pages, so it should be a quick read. This is a searing portrait of the silver screen superstars Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles. Columbia Pictures Studio head Harry Cohn hires Rusty Redburn and plants her in the household of Hayworth and Welles to spy on them and dig up dirt while posing as their secretary. Rapid-fire dialogue, slapstick action, and affecting character development make Big Red a rewarding song of praise to some of the greats of American cinema. I think that sounds like great fun. And as read-alikes, I selected Castles on the Sunset, or Castles on Sunset, about the Chateau Marmont, and also Hollywoodland. This came out several years ago, but it's written by David Wallace, and it got quite a bit of attention then, but it talks about old Hollywood. Quite wonderful. Okay, and Properties of Thirst. Okay, just for Anne, set during World War II. This is by Marion Wiggins, and it is set during World War II. But the premise for this one, I think, is pretty unique. Rocky Rhodes is a widower and a rancher who has spent a lot of time and a lot of energy protecting his California ranch from the LA Water Corporation. Very much his focus. And then World War II breaks out, and he finds that they are building the Japanese-American internment camp next to his ranch. Changes his focus a little bit. And the idealistic Department of the Interior man assigned to build the camp, who begins to understand the horror of his task after it's too late. He becomes infatuated with Rocky's daughter and entangled with the Rhodes family. This is a story of a changing American landscape and an examination of one of the darkest periods in our country's past. And I think that's a read. That's not a read for this one. Sorry. I had selected The Fervor. That I read it a couple months ago by Alma Katsu. It is also an internment camp story, but it has some kind of fantastical elements. So it's the story plus this sort of fantasy, kind of scary stuff that's added into the story, but it was very well done, and I enjoyed it very much, and it's checked out. And then They Called Us Enemy by George Takei, and this is his story, his biography told in graphic novel form. So, something a little bit different.
When we were bright and beautiful. Alright. This one's both a satisfying and heartbreaking novel. It is part courtroom drama and part domestic thriller. The narrator is 23-year-old Cassie, who joins her parents' efforts to exonerate her brother Billy, a junior at Princeton, from rape charges. In the process, she has to reckon with her own complicated past relationship with a married man. Kirkus says it's a thoughtful, if salacious, thriller about the nature of wealth, loyalty, and the ripple effects of trauma. Okay, so for real likes, so you remember, so this one's kind of part courtroom drama, part domestic thriller. If you're looking for more of a courtroom drama, Marigold Creek by Angie Kim is a courtroom drama about a Korean immigrant family and a young single mother accused of murdering her 8-year-old autistic son. So you have the courtroom setting, family, crime. And then Blood Will Tell would be more in the thriller vein of things by Heather Chavez. This is another new one. It's a suspenseful novel about a protective older sister who has to decide how far she'll go to protect her younger sister after her truck is linked to a girl's abduction. So family bonds, loyalty, secrecy.
Those are my notes. Moth by Melody Razak is a debut novel, and it is the saga of an Indian family's trials during the tumultuous partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. Our protagonist is 14-year-old Alma, who is engaged to be married. Despite their concerns, Alma's parents pray that her marriage will give her safety and stability in the current environment of political unrest and violence. This atmospheric and evocative story explores the impact of partition on women and what it means to be othered in your own country and the redemptive power of family. The first read-alike that I have is The Storm, with similar themes of This sweeping historical novel seamlessly interweaves 5 stories spanning 60 years of Bangladeshi history, from world wars to rebellions. With a wide and varied cast of characters, the story explores hope, loss, sacrifice, and the many ways that families' love and betrayal can ultimately end up honoring each. Sorry, there was a comma there that I missed. We won't go over that. My second read-alike is Partition, with a similar topic focus. It is also set during the 1947 partition of India and Pakistan. This novel takes a wide-angle lens at the situation, weaving together stories of families, kindness, heartbreak, and more. As India is rent into 2 countries, there's communal violence breaking out on both sides of the new border as a screaming mass of humanity flees from the bloodshed and chaos. With lyrical prose, the evocative story presents a hopeful tone despite the heartbreaking carnage.
Diary of a Void. This is by Emi Yagi, also a debut. And another quick read, 224 pages. And another one that's fun. I'm getting all funny ones today. 34-year-old Ms. Shibata gets a new job to escape sexual harassment at her old job. And she finds that as the only woman in the new workplace, all the menial tasks are her job. All up to her. One day, she announces that she cannot clear away her coworkers' dirty cups any longer because she is pregnant and the smell nauseates her. And the thing is, she's not pregnant. The pregnant Ms. Shibata doesn't have to serve coffee to anyone. Pregnant Ms. Shibata isn't forced to work overtime. Pregnant Ms. Shibata rests, watches TV, takes long baths, and even joins an aerobic class for expectant mothers. She's finally being treated by her colleagues as more than a hollow core. But she has a 9-month ruse to keep up. Before long, it becomes all absorbing, and with the help of her towel-stuffed shirts and a diary app that tracks every stage of her pregnancy, the boundary between her life and her lie begins to dissolve. This is a surreal and absurdist, and it's written with a winning matter-of-factness, a light touch, and a refreshing sensitivity to mental health. Just how far will Ms. Shibata carry her deception for the sake of women, and especially working women everywhere? The read-alikes I chose, Convenience Store Woman is it's more about living up to expectations, but the protagonists of each sound like they're very similar types of women. Although in the Convenience Store Woman, she's younger, and she too must live up to cultural and family expectations. And the Pregnancy Project is nonfiction, and this is a young Hispanic girl realizes that everyone automatically expects her to get pregnant and have babies when she's a teenager, and she has aspirations that are very different. And as an experiment, she too fakes a pregnancy, and she journals and chronicles how it changed the way people close to her and people that she just passed by in general, how they treated her differently. So, very interesting look at that. And the Pregnancy Project is true. Now we have Perish by Latoya Watkins, I'm sorry. This is an exploration of the effects of inherited trauma and intergenerational violence. Helen Jean is on her deathbed. In her her family is gathered to say goodbye. Spanning decades, Parish tracks the choices Helen Jean has made and the way those choices have rippled across generations, from her children to her grandchildren and beyond. The family's reunion unearths long-kept secrets and forces each member to ask themselves important questions about who deserves to be forgiven and who should bear the cost of blame. The story is told in alternating chapters that follow 4 members of the Turner family as they're called home to say goodbye to their matriarch. Tackling things like family, trauma, legacy, home, class, race, and more, this beautiful yet heart-wrenching novel will appeal to anyone who is interested in the intricacies of family and the ways bonds can be made, maintained, or irrevocably broken. I chose 2 read-alikes. One is checked out. It's The Promise by Gal Boot. It was the Booker Prize winner last year. Story outline is almost identical. Of course, I haven't read LaToya Watkins' writing at this point because she's new. But The Promise is a beautifully written book, and it's a small book, but you could probably use this description pretty much, just change the names to describe LaToya Watkins' book. And I also chose On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous because number 1, it's one of my favorite books, and number 2, it has very similar themes: the family, the trauma, intergenerational violence, and those themes, and written by Ocean Wong, who is a poet by training. So that makes his writing is very poignant and very well done.
Dirt Creek. Dirt Creek, this one's a debut novel by an Australian author. Publishers Weekly says this novel blends a taut psychological thriller with a suspenseful police procedural and has a well-crafted plot that builds to a powerful conclusion. The premise of Dirt Creek, we have a detective and her partner who are investigating the disappearance of a 12-year-old girl in small-town rural Australia. The girl's tenacious best friend is also determined to find out what happened to her. One interesting feature of this book of note, apparently it's punctuated by a Greek chorus, which gives voice to the remaining children of the small dying town. A couple read-alikes. First, we have The Dry by Jane Harper. This one came out a few years ago, but it was her debut. It's an atmospheric mystery, also set in Australia. This one's about a federal agent who returns to his hometown and looks into the death of a childhood friend. And then another read-alike would be Everything I Never Told You, in which a couple's life is thrown into turmoil after their missing teenage daughter is found drowned in a nearby lake. Another debut, Shudder by Ramona Emerson. This one is a paranormal page-turner set within the context of the Navajo Nation in Albuquerque, New Mexico, written with expressive prose and suspenseful storytelling. So we have a forensic photographer, Rita Todachin, who is the story's first-person narrator. She can commune with the dead, a gift that helps her succeed in the crime scene specialist unit that has also left her alienated from her Navajo community and ever burdened by the damaged spirits who haunt her. In this case, the ghost of an apparent suicide victim insists that her death was a cartel-related murder and forces Rita on the dangerous pursuit of her killers. Later, by Stephen King, is another suspenseful paranormal crime novel in which an NYPD detective pursues a killer with the help of a boy who can see dead people. And then The Ghost Walker by Margaret Cole. This one is part of the Wind River Mystery Series, which takes place near the Arapaho Indian Reservation in Wyoming. And despite the title, I don't think there's any paranormal aspects to this one. But we have Father John O'Malley, who is the series protagonist. He discovers a dead body that subsequently disappears.
So, All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers is also a debut novel. Our protagonist is Margot Davis, a journalist who uncovers her hometown's dark secrets when she becomes obsessed with the unsolved murder of her childhood friend and the disappearance of another girl just 20 years later. Here is a gritty, chilling story of a woman who will stop at nothing to discover the truth and is sure to please fans of true crime described as atmospheric and just generally creepy. My first read-alike is The Secrets They Left Behind by Lisa Marie Redman. With similar dark and gritty tones, this is the story of 3 missing girls, no leads, and a vault of secrets in a case that is getting colder by the minute. A police procedural, our protagonist is Buffalo Police Officer Shay O'Connor. She is thrown into the situation to try and dig up new leads. With believable characters and a well-plotted story, things go from cold to hot as you follow O'Connor through the twists and turns of solving this small-town disappearance. The next read-alike I have is How to Bury Your Brother by Lindsay Rogers Cook. With similar themes of dealing with childhood trauma and disappearance, this story follows a sister, Alice, and her journey coming to terms with the mysterious disappearance and death of her brother, Rob. Alice has always thought that she would see her brother, Rob, again and that he would find his way home, but after his funeral, she resigns herself to only remember him. As she helps clear out their childhood bedroom, she begins to discover papers and letters addressed from Rob. With family lies and secrets being unearthed, Alice begins to suspect that there is more to the tragic loss of her brother in this chilly, gritty family drama. I somehow got all of the dark ones this time. I don't know how I managed that. Other than I just went, oh, that looks like a nice cover. Anyway. So, Dark Music by David Lagerkrantz. Also available in large print. This is a murder investigation that causes 2 unlikely allies to come together and race to uncover a shadowy international conspiracy. Our protagonists are Michelle Vargas, a street-smart police officer, and Professor Han Reck, Swedish, so I got nothing on this one. There's some very fun, yeah, thanks. Anyway, he is a fragile but brilliant authority on the art of interrogation. With quirky writing style and an interesting cast of characters, this Sherlock Holmes-inspired story will leave you wondering what's next for the odd couple. My first read-alike, it is elementary, my dear friends, that it would be, in fact, the complete illustrated adventures of Sherlock Holmes, containing not only the stories but also complete reproductions of the original illustrations from the Strand magazine. This volume has not only the first story that introduces Holmes and Watson together, but all of their adventures, allowing you to follow their exploits and character development. The game is afoot in these richly detailed stories written in lyrical 19th Writers of America presents Odd Partners and Anthology. This is a collection of new stories written by some of today's best mystery authors that focuses on unique character pairings working together to get to the bottom of a variety of different whodunits. These stories involve several different subgenres of mystery, and are set in several time periods and written in a wide array of styles. There's a little something for everyone in here for fans of mystery.
And she's getting the dark ones and I'm getting the fun ones.
And he's getting the Australian ones.
Oh,
I should give you a little bit of a hint what this one's about.
This is Peg and Rose Solve a Murder by Lorian Berenson. Book 1 of a new series. And this is described as Murder, She Wrote meets The Odd Couple. This is a brand new series spun off from Berenson's much-loved Melanie Travis Canine Mysteries. And it features Melanie's elderly aunts, cantankerous Peg and soft-spoken Rose, who put aside their differences to stop a killer if they don't throttle each other first. After 40 years of bickering, they're attempting to start over, partnering up to join the local bridge club. They barely have a chance to celebrate their first win before one of the club's most accomplished players is killed in his home. As the newest members, the sisters-in-law, come under scrutiny and decide to start some digging of their own. And bridge is typically seen as a wholesome pastime, yet this group of senior citizens harbors a wealth of vices, including gambling, cheating, and adultery. Peg and Rose's fractious relationship is starting to feel almost functional, but as their suspect list narrows, they're unaware that their logic has a dangerous flaw, and they'll have to hope that their teamwork holds steady when they're confronted by a killer who's through with playing games. And Rita likes, this is her, Berenson's first in her series, Melanie Travis. And also, the Thursday Murder Club. Did everybody in this room read that book? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we all jumped on that one. So it's obvious why that's a read-alike. And then I also grabbed one of the Murder, She Wrote mysteries that we have by Jessica Fletcher and Donald Bain. There are several of these, and if you want to get yourself in the mood, visit some Jessica Fletcher.
Stay Awake by Megan Golden. This one's an entertaining, adrenaline-fueled thriller with well-drawn female characters. The setting is modern-day New York City, and we have a magazine writer living there who finds herself running from the police and searching for answers after she wakes up in the back of a taxi with a bloody knife in her pocket, a cryptic message scrawled on her skin, and no memory of the past 2 years. Narration shifts between her present-day predicament, a homicide detective's investigation, and flashbacks from 2 years earlier. Some similar reads would be Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney, in which a woman wakes up paralyzed in a hospital bed, unable to remember what happened to put her there. And then The End of Her by Sherry LaPena, which is a domestic suspense novel about the stay-at-home mother of twin girls, whose world is thrown into turmoil after the circumstances of her husband's first wife's death are called into question. We have Firestorm. So this is the second book in Moore's new series set in modern-day Texas, featuring DEA Special Agent Garrett Cole, and it's described as a pulse-pounding thriller. In the second installment, Cole battles the Talon Corporation, a powerful and corrupt corporation that threatens his beloved Texas homestead with its mining operations and uses bribery and violence to achieve its goals. The stakes rise even further when they kidnap Cole's friend, CIA operative Kim Manning. So if you want to read the first book, that's going to be downrange. In this one, Cole fights to protect his home and family against a dangerous drug cartel. And if this Taylor Moore series strikes your fancy, you will probably also like the Joe Pickett series by C.J. Box. I mean, just look at these titles. Do I have to say? I mean, these covers. Do I have to say anything else? Got a guy in a cowboy hat, rifle,
Yeah.
countryside, yeah.
Very original.
Yeah.
Word range.
They're all facing the same way.
Yeah.
Joe Pickett is a Wyoming game warden who's also committed to pursuing justice and protecting his family, much like Garrett Cole in the Taylor Moore series.
The Housekeeper by Joy Fielding. I just want to read a brief bit from the actual copy text. In the end, I have only myself to blame. I'm the one who let her in. Our protagonist is Jodi Bishop, and she is exhausted from balancing her career, her marriage is in trouble, and of course she has the needs of her ailing parents. So Jodi decides to hire a housekeeper to help care for her parents. At first, everything seems wonderful, but then as things continue, nothing is as it seems, and this well-crafted domestic thriller will keep you up into the wee hours as you try to follow its twists and turns as the two women battle it out. Our first read-alike is The Perfect Nanny. This one, unfortunately, is an ebook or e-audiobook only. I thought it was an actual audiobook physically here, and it was not when I realized it, so I'm sorry about that. It also has a similar story structure as far as somebody hiring a domestic helper and things going horribly awry. Miriam, a French-Moroccan lawyer, and her overworked husband Paul decide to hire a nanny for their two children and help them around their house, a chic apartment in one of Paris's upscale districts. Louise is perfect. She is polite, caring, and devoted to their children. But as Miriam, Paul, and Louise become closer, the idyllic tableau is shattered as jealousy and suspicion mount. This intensifying, dark, very creepy novel will keep you engaged as you try to discover the motives of each character. And I have another general warning for this book. There are it contains some graphic violence and things that you may be very uncomfortable with, just as a general heads up. The next read-alike I have is Magpie by Elizabeth Day. This taut psychological suspense novel is about the perfect couple and their seemingly perfect roommate. Marissa and Jake have been living together for a long time, got married, and their hope is to start a family. But they are having trouble with it. They also have to rent out a room in their home in order to afford things, and they think they have found the perfect lodger in Kate. That is, until she threatens to destroy everything they've worked so hard to create. This compelling character-driven story dives deep into the psyches of both of these women and their adversarial relationship.
The other one probably looks familiar. Haven by Emma Donoghue. This is a beautiful story of adventure and survival from the author of Room. Did anyone read Room? Yeah, it was a doozy. 3 men vow to leave the world behind. As they set out in a small boat for an island their leader has seen in a dream, with only faith to guide them. In 7th century Ireland, a scholar and a priest called Art has a dream telling him to leave the sinful world behind. Taking 2 monks, young Tryon and old Cormac, he rows down the River Shannon in search of an isolated spot on which to found a monastery. Drifting out into the Atlantic, the 3 men find an impossibly steep, bare island inhabited by tens of thousands of birds and claim it for God. In such a place, what will survival mean? Peter Heller got my vote as a read-alike because of the river adventure aspect. And Louise Penny's beautiful. Yeah. there's a like a glare, and I'm like, the biannual. Wait, did I grab my book? The Beautiful Mystery by Louise Penny. Also about an isolated monastery, and just my own editorial comment, this is my favorite Louise Penny book.
All of hers are my favorites.
All of them, yeah, I love all of them, but this one is a particular favorite.
This is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. I'm also going to read a little bit of the copy from the cover. Daisy Darker's family were as dark can be. When one of them died, all of them lied and pretended not to see. Our protagonist is young Daisy Darker, who travels to her grandmother's house for her Nana's 80th birthday. Perched on a tiny Cornish island, the house is called Sea Glass, and it is cut off for 8 hours when the tide comes in, leaving Daisy and her family, who hasn't gathered like this in over a decade, trapped with a killer among them. The story is a union of a thriller and a lock-in mystery, with an overarching sense of lurking danger, a creepy atmosphere. This large cast of characters will keep you guessing until the end. And of course, the quintessential lock-in mystery is my first read-alike, and then there were none by Agatha Christie, where 10 strangers are summoned as weekend guests to a private island off the Devon coast. Their host is an eccentric millionaire unknown to all of them, who has around his home hung famous lines from a nursery rhyme in each room. No one is above suspicion, and Agatha Christie is the undisputed queen of mystery in this well-plotted story will demonstrate. The next read-alike I have is The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. It is a book about a group of friends from Oxford who have kept up a tradition from their student days that is welcoming the new year together. This has been a tradition of theirs for the past 10 years. Now in their 30s, the friends have decided to have their gathering in an idyllic, though isolated, estate in the Scottish Highlands. A blizzard sets in and seals them away together in the lodge. With plenty of supplies, everything seems okay. That is until one of them is found dead. An intensifying, psychologically suspenseful plot will keep you shivering.
Okay, The Neuroscience of You. This is an accessible and informative debut book by a University of Washington professor and cognitive neuroscientist. Instead of focusing on the general commonalities of our brains, as most psychology textbooks do, Pratt focuses on what characteristics make human brains vary, arguing that every brain is unique. She covers the basics as well as newer groundbreaking research. The book includes puzzles and tests to illustrate points and lots of footnotes. Library Journal calls it a highly readable, entertaining, and authoritative book recommended for all non-specialists interested in how the brain works. If you're looking for other popular level about the human brain, you might also try The Brain by David Eagleman, which was the basis for a PBS docuseries, or Mind Wide Open by Stephen Johnson.
Dancing Cockatoos and the Dead Man Test by Marion Zook. For centuries, people have been returning to the same tired nature versus nurture debate. And I have a psychology degree, and I can't tell you how much I hate those three words. Nature versus nurture. I'm very excited about this new book. Trying to determine what we learn and what we inherit. In this book, biologist Marion Zook goes beyond the binary and instead focuses on interaction, or the way that genes and environment work together. If you've ever had or observed children, multiple children from the same family, you know this, okay? Driving her investigation is a simple but essential question: how does behavior evolve? For insights into animal intelligence, mating behavior, and an organism's ability to fight disease, she explores the behavior of smart spiders, silent crickets, and crafty cows. In each example, she clearly demonstrates how these traits were produced by the complex and diverse interactions of genes and the environment, and urges us to consider how that same process evolves behavior in humans. Genius, right? Filled with delightful anecdotes and fresh insights, Dancing Cockatoos and the Dead Man Test help us see both other animals and ourselves more clearly, demonstrating that animal behavior can be remarkably similar to human behavior and wonderfully complicated in its own right. Another editorial piece here. I had to take comparative psychology. I was ready to graduate. It was the last psychology class that was being offered, and I thought, what bunk. I do not want to sit through this nonsense about how I'm like an animal. And it turned out to be one of my favorite classes. And it was all verifiably true. I could go home and experiment with my children and it would work. So, are we smart enough to know how smart animals are? This is by Franz de Waal, and he is the top of the game as far as comparative psychology. And also Wildhood. This is this author takes a look at teenage animals and teenage humans and finds out how they have some very similar behaviors. Jean, you might be interested.
So this is Sinkable Obsession, the Deep Sea and the Sea Wreck of the Titanic, or Shipwreck of the Titanic by Daniel Stone. It outlines the obsessive 73-year search to find the wreck of the Titanic by generations of eccentric individuals, including one gentleman who thought if he got enough ships with magnets together, they could raise the Titanic and find it that way. And several other stories, as well as the future of the ship since it has been found. With vivid detail and careful research, Stone spins a fascinating tale of history and science, taking you through the 2 miles of ocean water in which the Titanic sank. Brimming with humor, curiosity, and wit, this book is sure to whet your appetite for more. Yep. My first read-alike is Voyagers of the Titanic, Passengers, Sailors, Shipbuilders, Aristocrats, and the Worlds They Came From by R. Davenport Hines. This lyrical history focuses on the people of the Titanic from the infamous ship's beginnings to its tragic end, derived from letters and interviews taken from survivors and meticulous research. It provides a unique and very broad view of one of the most monstrous disasters of the 20th century and its aftermath. One reviewer described it as being reintroduced to the story of the Titanic like you never knew it before. My next read-alike is Return to the Titanic by Dr. Robert Ballard and Michael Sweeney. Dr. Ballard is the one who discovered the Titanic. According to him, the author, he wanted to do something different, and his direct quote is, "Every possible book has been written on the Titanic, and the Titanic addicts have all of them. This they will not have." This compelling illustrated book is a journey back in time to the ship sinking in 1912, with images taken in the early 2000s. You'll be able to see the changes in the site from the original 1985 images. Dr. Ballard vividly describes what they have learned from the wreck and his efforts to create a global conservation group to prevent the looting of the site. Which unfortunately does in fact happen. Lethal Tides, Mary Sears and the marine scientists who helped win World War II, by Catherine Usmensch. It weaves together science, biography, and military history into the compelling story of an unsung woman and her team who dramatically impacted the U.S. Navy's success against the Imperial Japanese Navy in World War II. Mary Sears created an intelligence-gathering juggernaut based on the new science of oceanography. She and her often described wacky, quirky team of scientists played a major role in averting catastrophes like those that plagued the early amphibious landings in the Pacific and helped clear the way to Okinawa. The first read-alike I have is The Girls Who Stepped Out of Line by Major General Marie Edner. It details the often ignored stories of women who served, fought, and struggled in and out of uniform during World War II. From cartographers to resistance fighters to members of the WASPs or Women's Air Force Service pilots, thanks to Major General Edner, extensive research and narrative style, the extraordinary actions of these women will be forever remembered. The next read-alike I have is The Pacific, Hell Was an Ocean Away by Hugh Ambrose. It follows the story of five American soldiers who each took an active role in major campaigns in the Pacific. The successful history weaves together their stories and major details of the fighting in the Pacific theater to provide you with a roadmap to the Pacific campaign strategy and the horrifically graphic realities faced by those who served. It is a bit different from the HBO miniseries if you have seen that, in that it goes more on the higher level of looking at the strategy in the Pacific.
Okay, no more World War II, Ann, we're done. For today. This one's for you, Carol Kelly. Nomad Century, How Climate Migration Will Reshape Our World by Gaia Vince. This is an investigation of an underreported consequence of climate change, how it will force us to change where and how we live. Drought-hit regions are making a rural life untenable for many. Coastlines are diminishing, wildfires and hurricanes are leaving widening swaths of destruction. We face not only climate change itself, but a perhaps more seismic consequence, a total reshaping of the Earth's human geography. Global migration has doubled in the past decade, and we are on track to see literal billions displaced in the coming decades. How will this new great migration reshape us all? Vince draws on a career of environmental reporting and over 2 years of travel to the front lines of climate migration across the globe to tell us how the changes already in play will transform our food, our cities, our politics, and much more. gonna end with a quote. In this deeply reported clarion call, we are facing a species emergency. We can survive, but to do so will require a planned and deliberate migration of a kind humanity has never before undertaken. This is the biggest human crisis you've never heard of. And Rita likes for this one, humankind, how biology and geography shape human diversity. That was an easy one to choose. Topics are going to be very, I'm sure, will be very parallel. And mapping human history, discovering the past through our genes by Steve Olson. And our genetic history also touches on place often. If you've done any 23andMe or whatever, you know that you get a lot of like surprising information. I don't know if any of you have ever met my husband. He's tall and blonde and blue-eyed, and you just know by looking at him that's German. Okay, he's so German looking, and he thought he would just come back almost 100% German, and he found out he's got this Central Asian thing, which is, you know, it's kind of a mystery because we've got a lot of genealogy done, but we haven't made that connection. So he's sure it's Genghis Khan. I'll keep you all informed because I'm sure you're on the edge of your seats. All right, that wraps up our Moves in Focus for today. Thank you all for